I'm Eric Loy, and welcome to Loy Interviews. On this podcast, we talk with folks from the VTuber community on their channels, their talents, their stories, where they come from, and their plans for the future. We welcome Sky to the show. Hi.
Hello.
Hey, could you please introduce yourself to everybody?
Hello, my name is Tokpelkyaysiw. I am a Native American VTuber, and I do history and history art.
It is, folks. If you haven't seen Sky's channel, it is, it's definitely, it's not your usual channel on the internet, and it certainly is, not just entertaining but also informative as well. Yeah, it's. I think it's very interesting, especially when you kind of take the art pieces and kind of dissect them a little bit, give a little history to them. It definitely adds a lot of layers to that particular art piece.
I do my best to teach a little bit of the history around the art piece and the artist, and I really do like doing historical artists, especially artists from the 18th, the 19th, and 17th centuries.
Yeah.
You know, when they first came here to the Americas and captured my people.
Oh yeah. And the with lack of a better term, I guess, romanticism of what was going on during that time was something that we can't relate to here now at this time, because you're talking about societies meeting for the first time, and certainly some things were glossed over, some things were given.
Definitely romanticized and
Yeah.
blown of proportions, of course.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And of course, the Europeans and other settlers didn't have any idea what was going on at the time. It's something that we'll never have, I guess, is the total first contact between two, or I should say, a civilization and multiple civilizations.
Exactly. And it's really interesting. And as well as I intend to do readings of letters sent from soldiers back to their home about the tribes.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that's very interesting, I find, with a lot of paintings and letters, is viewed very differently from the common soldier and priest, you know, from like the commanding and leadership. The leadership, the way they view the tribes, a lot of the time was through a tactical lens or a documentary lens, much like a lot of the artists I've covered in the past.
Yeah, it more as a group of people rather than, you know, and sometimes and less than human in some cases, especially among the commanders. I can remember growing up in school, and we learned very little about Native Americans in our history class, other than we were told, of course, the great fallacy about how great Custer was at the Last Stand. Now we know better. I think that is certainly. How do you feel about people trying to, you know, whitewash everything again and try to get it back to where we were ignorant of the facts?
Honestly, it is a very great shame.
Yeah.
As someone who's heavily involved with my people and my community, I do my best to teach and try to explain both the good and the bad parts of history.
Mm-hmm.
I will 100% admit, and other people who do the same thing I do, who do teach Native American history, and it's regrettable to say, even they do a little bit of whitewashing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You have very big separate views. You have the whitewashed, of course, and then you have, lack of better words, the redwashed.
Mm-hmm.
A big part of Native American history, people say, "Oh, we were always the good guys." Not necessarily.
No.
I'm someone, who takes pride on true honesty of history.
Mm.
The Native American people, my people, the best way I like to describe it, the story of the American Indian is a story of tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
As well as, we were men and women turned to savages by savagery.
Mm.
And the thing is, there's a lot of my people who claim there was no war before the Europeans and before the white settlers came. That
No.
is a very, big untruth.
Yeah.
And that is the thing that bothers me the most.
It really is, and to and in saying things like this, like, "Oh, everybody lived in peace. There wasn't any war." It lumps everybody together into one big, easily digestible form when, as I said, it wasn't just one civilization people were coming up on. It was all sorts of civilizations that all developed completely different um, tiers of society and types of life. It's very you really lose so much of the context if you do something like that.
And it's one of the greatest shames. A lot of time I see, especially taught in school, Native American history is often brushed over or treated as. Trying to remember the exact example. Um, we were in the way. There's the best example I can give
Yeah,
to you.
yeah,
It's often used. We were in the way, and what would happen to us was, going to happen no matter what in history.
hmm
And of course, no matter what, it would have occurred, and it's a shame. The only thing I truly strive to do, and I tell, and what I'd love to do, in a perfect world, I'd love to teach more about history and culture, but no matter what, you can't cram more than 1,000 years of history of Native America into school.
Oh no,
So I believe it should be somewhat generalized, but focused more on the truth of the matter.
I can tell you this: back in the '70s, when I was in school, we we had a social studies class every year from, I believe, third grade to sixth grade, and every year we started at a certain point in time, and we got up to the Civil War, and that was it. That's that, and every year we'd stop there and start over again, and it was, especially in the '70s, it was a very one-sided look at what had happened. We didn't learn the term manifest destiny until later on. We didn't really learn about the Trail of Tears. We didn't learn about other uh, encampments and removal of entire civilizations. Um, we didn't find out about that. This
And
Go ahead.
the thing is, when I was in school, I wasn't taught, well, pretty much almost exactly as you explained it. That's kind of the same way I was taught.
Hmm.
The only biggest difference is I attended a class. It was called Indian Ed,
Mm.
and this was a very specific class you can sign your children up for, and it was primarily used for Native children, of course.
Hmm.
But you could assign, sign up almost anybody. But it's one of the things you had to ask for. You weren't told it was available. It was very hard to get even into.
Hmm.
And when I was attending school at the time, there was only three other people in this class besides myself, two other natives, and I think a young Hispanic gentleman. But that was really about it. And we were taught still very, very basic history. The class was only like 30 minutes out of the day.
Yeah.
We'd be rushed to like one of the trailers, and we'd attend class, and we would be taught as basic, like really, really, really simple history,
Mm.
nothing too deep. But one of the biggest things that stuck with me, my teacher, her name is Miss Kirkhoff, a lovely, lovely lady. I still remember her to this day. One afternoon, she brought in a bunch of things, a bunch of artifacts, and a bunch of stuff she had made from tribal craftsmen around the area.
Right.
And it was a beautiful, beautiful spread of, well, traditional clothing, tools, and the sorts.
Right. Right. That type of stuff, when you look at that and see it, you can definitely see the differences in the cultures of the local folks. Just in what they were wearing and the items that many of them are still producing. Um, I guess the toughest part for me is to hear somebody lumping them all together when obviously, the Cherokees didn't have the same as the Blackfoot. It didn't have the same as the Pueblo builders. It wasn't even close. Um,
It
but
was all different societies, but
yeah,
yet they were all intertwined in their own ways. And the biggest thing that supports, what I do today, I mean, of course, I do VTubing, and I really enjoy that. I
Hmm.
really, really do.
Yeah.
But as well as I make jewelry, and I'm, a traditional craftsman as well.
Oh, cool. What type of jewelry do you make?
I would do beadwork and silversmithing, and I like working with copper.
Oh, silversmithing. That sounds interesting. And beadwork is something else too. Um, we used to where I'm at is in central Illinois, and occasionally we find some artifacts here, beads and some arrowheads and such. Um, but not much is talked about how to make those things. Uh, you don't just grab something and then say it's a bead and stick a hole in
String
it.
through it.
Yeah, it's not going to work that way. But to know that there were folks who back a couple hundred years ago that were producing very fine work in these things. The craftsmanship was really amazing, considering they didn't have electrical power tools or anything like that. Um, do you work the traditional style of doing it, or do you use the modern stuff to do it?
When I do any form of work when it comes to making either clothing, bead, or jewelry, just normal regalia or even tools, I do my best to use traditional tools.
Mm,
I try not to use electric or metal tools. But of course, there's a few times where I need to, or it's more safer for me to do so.
mm-hmm,
But a lot of the times, I gather the resources myself, or some of my family brings me some,
mm,
and I make them, traditionally as I was taught.
So do you hand make some tools?
Of course, a few times I've handmade a bunch of hammers and other stuff. I work with metal as well, so
Mm,
I've made several tools from iron.
yeah.
Um, I can't say I'm the greatest skilled in it, but I do my best.
Uh, hey, you're keeping something alive, and it's something that's very important to you, and that's incredible. I mean, first of all, it's a lot of talent to do something like that because I know I couldn't get close. But secondly, it's carrying on a tradition that needs to be carried on somehow without being erased or rewritten so many times throughout history. Um, I watch some folks do like a metal detector type things, and occasionally they come across arrowheads made out of steel in the Maryland
That's
area.
a good one to talk
I I I
about.
never knew anything like that was made back then. I mean, we always got the old cart, flints
from
and work that sort of thing.
from the uh, I apologize.
No.
From the first arrival of the settlers, the first things that was traded was metal pots, knives, and other metal tools.
Hmm.
Most likely, what was found was either they're called kettle arrowheads,
Right.
and they are made from kettles.
Yeah.
The tribes would stamp out arrowheads from kettles,
Yeah.
either made of brass, copper, or steel or iron, and they would do this with wagon wheels and most metals they would hammer out to serve their purposes.
Right. And just I was blown away by this because that's something we weren't ever shown. It was always the handworked stuff, which is incredible in its own right. But I imagine when it was figured out that you could do this and you could use this material, it was kind of a boon because you can reuse a lot of those things. If it'd be hard to break one of those off, but you find broken or misshaped arrowheads all the time in the wild.
And that is the incredible thing. I've been working on something for a very long time, but that was something we'll talk about here in a minute.
Mm,
The way metal tools, and just overall metal introduction, especially refined metals, it changed how almost all tribes handled tool work and business overall.
mm,
And there was metal that pre-existed colonial contact. It came in the form of soft hammer forged tools.
mm. Yeah, and how did they did they learn on their own how to forge this metal?
Uh, Necessarily, yes and no.
Mm,
Uh, In the Great Lakes region, there's the tribes, the Great Lake tribes,
Hmm.
and they managed to cold forge copper, and they would dig the copper from the surface, so it'd be oxidized and turned green.
Right.
And copper is already malleable, so what they would do, they would throw it in a fire and they would heat it up. Excuse me, they would heat up high as they can, and then they would hammer it out with stone tools and other things to form crude shapes, and either of blades or of other tools like hatchets and knives. But it never went anything beyond that, and it was strictly to the Great Lakes region and the Aztec Empire in the far south.
And well, you talk about it being crude. It might be crude, but it's also so far advanced from what it was. It I would love to have been there to see the idea form to do something like that. Um, because maybe necessity is the mother to this type of invention, but this is something that's a totally foreign concept to folks who haven't seen it done before. Yet they discover it and work it out to where they can effectively use it themselves. Pretty incredible.
I agree. And as well, some of these tools that were forged, or I can't really say forged, cold forged up in the Great Lakes,
Mm,
they have been found down here in the Southwest,
mm,
and it is believed it came through trade. And this is the biggest, like one of the biggest misunderstandings about, Native America before European arrival.
mm,
Yes, we were all separate societies, but we had interactions with each other, both
mhm.
hostile and non-hostile.
Yeah,
There used to be massive trade fairs that would occur all throughout the United States. So a tool that was made for, you say, in the New England area could end up all the way, on the California coast.
right, right, and that just made sense. I mean, basically, not trying to oversimplify what was going on, but these were different countries. It would be like folks from Europe uh, getting together and sharing, trade. There were representatives. There were people who were you know specifically there to deal with other tribes. They had to learn languages. They had to. It was a real United Nations concept at that point.
Exactly. One of the biggest things, most tribes had either interpreters or they had a trade language.
Mm,
When English came around, English and Spanish became oftentimes the trade languages of the tribe. Because at
mm,
the time, most tribes either began to learn English, Spanish, and French.
right.
So the tribes started to switch away from using plain sign language and other certain trade languages to this language because, it was a necessity.
Absolutely, absolutely. I really hope that eventually, uh, even though it is more taught now than it was when I was a kid, I hope that it gets even more taught because so much of what we have now, people point to Eurocentric uh, advances, but a lot of it was was native advances as well. Um, a lot of farming, a lot of that type of stuff, and uh, nature. There are so many things that we have learned from the Native Americans, and I hate to see that totally get lost in the shuffle of patents and all that sort of thing. Um, it, do you think that we'll be able to do that eventually? Get a really good, regular sort of historical education for people in that regard?
And I agree. Honestly, I truly believe that Native American history needs to be taught a little more.
Mm,
But personally, as a Native American myself, I this is a feeling I have, and the course others, have different feelings about it.
mm,
I personally feel as if my history is slowly being forgotten, and it is coming mainly from people who are my age.
mm,
A lot of my people around my age, they often choose to go live elsewhere, or choose different ways of living than the way I choose. And of course, the world would be awfully boring if we all believed the same.
mm,
And the one thing I can do say though, it is sad when you start, because when I was little, I remember seeing a lot of people attend ceremonies and show up for them.
mm.
Now it's only the old people. It's only the old men.
Yeah. Yeah, the real traditionalists that that use
Mhm.
the um, dress um, and everything else to properly do these types of gatherings and ceremonies. When you see something that is just absolute, is somebody being taught something that's absolutely completely wrong, as and is being taught as fact about how the Native Americans and the Europeans interacted. What does that do? Does it make you angry, sad, or what?
It makes me a bit sorrowful. I
Mm,
wish people would teach history correctly, but I cannot, control others and how they teach.
mm,
I would, I'd go up to them and I would ask, I'd not, go up to them and say, hey, you're doing the wrong thing. I would sit there and listen, and then I would, retort with what I was taught. And of course, it's differences of just general teaching.
mm. Well, yeah, and it's also tough to teach something to somebody who wants to believe otherwise. I think that's part of of what we were dealing with in the '70s was that we didn't want all of us. And I grew up in a school that was 105% white American folks, native, not I mean European descendants, uh, and we didn't want to feel bad. we we wanted to be the good guys, and that's why I think a lot of the history back then was shaped that way. Um, we don't want to feel bad about what our ancestors did, um, but if we don't learn about it, we're not going to be able to avoid doing it in the future.
Exactly. And
You know, it's just it's and that goes for a lot of things, not just you know that type of history.
I, uh, I sincerely apologize. My microphone went out,
Oh
so
no,
do
no,
forgive me.
no, don't worry about that. It's fine. The So how did you get involved in um, learning about specifically the artwork? Um, why did you choose doing that?
More or less, I thought it'd be an interesting medium, to talk about.
Hmm.
Because looking at early artwork and art depictions of early settlers and early Europeans, oftentimes they would adopt a documentarian style of painting,
Hmm.
and this is actually where you would find the most accurate depictions of Native Americans. And I thought it would be an interesting way to teach people through paintings, as well as in some of my longer-ish form contents.
Hmm.
I do talk more about the history.
Mm. Yeah, and it really is. It's as close as, although there are photographs later on when the you know the photography became a little more uh, accessible. Those are essentially photographs as best as can be done of the basic living at the time. It's Is it easy for you at this point to discern between what is um, a true to life representation and what may have been um, embellished a little bit?
A little bit. I can say I can identify certain key things, as being well true and some as being embellished.
Mm,
I can't say I'm an expert. In no means I am, but I can somewhat identify what is accurate to the time and what isn't.
yeah. Well, I mean, I imagine that somebody could point out if um, the subject is supposed to be, um, Sioux, and they're wearing something that would be more like you know upstate New York now types of things that would be pretty inauthentic. But that wouldn't be something that your average Joe or Jill would be able to spot. Can you spot something like that?
For the most part, yes, but of course, I still have my difficulties.
Mm, yeah, yeah, and I can see why people would do that because most painters still wanted to sell their painting when it was done,
Of course.
but when you see the old photographs that were taken in the late 1800s, um, do you get a still a fascination when seeing a new one come to light?
Of course, one of my biggest prides is a lot of time I spend my time doing research
Hmm.
for my content, of
Right.
course, and for my own personal gain. Um, but then it's always intriguing to see, photos and of course paintings from different eras and different times,
Mm,
among that time, and especially the photos. It shows a profound sorrow in
mm.
some of the photos,
Oh yeah.
and of course, as well as in reading some of the letters as well.
Mm,
And the thing is, there was a lot of sorrow on both sides.
mm,
When the Spanish first came down to the Southwest, um, several of the soldiers wrote back to their home, the few that were literate, and several of these letters are still kept to this day and transcribed.
mm,
And I read a few of them, and it's really interesting to see how they describe my people. They and when the Spanish first arrived, they did not know really what the Puebloan religions were,
right.
because what they saw, of the other Native Americans further south was the grand temples and
Mm,
humongous churches.
right. Yeah. And once they saw the more details of it and the fact that it wasn't a universal type thing, um, did that cause some pause among the soldiers?
Yes. There was a famous, not a terribly famous, but I'll read you a bit of an expert, or I cannot speak English apparently, do forgive me.
No worries.
I read you a little bit of what I can remember off the top of my head. Um, we cannot tell whether they worship the sky, the sun, the moon, or demons.
Mm,
And the demons they refer to were kachinas, which kachina dancers are spirits, but it's a whole different thing.
mm,
It confused them
mm,
with the kivas, which, if you don't know what a kiva is, it is an underground chamber where you would go to pray and perform certain ceremonies and have counsel.
mm,
And it was these things that confused them. Is like I said, they were used to seeing the bigger temples and bigger religious structures
mm.
of the southern tribes.
I imagine those kivas too. It was a lot cooler in the. I I really have a some of those temperatures that those folks were living in had to be intense and really tough to deal with. I mean, uh, so I imagine something that was underground a little ways would be a little bit more comfortable to have these ceremonies and meetings in.
Mhm. And the way a lot of Puebloan housing was built, the reason it was built, with a certain material, a lot of it was sunken into the ground a few feet.
Hmm.
It was to preserve, temperature in the summer and then in the winter.
Yeah,
It's truly ingenious how it was done.
and that's we need to recognize that because um, these societies lasted for centuries, and they didn't have all of the um, Renaissance and Iron Age type things. They found these things themselves and adopted and improved these things. And a lot of these things we're still using the concept of today.
If you look, if you ever come down here to the southwest, you can see a lot of the houses of down here. They resemble, what they used to look like
Mm,
way back when.
yeah.
It was more, to keep, certain styles alive, and a lot of Spanish housing,
Mm, yeah.
especially around that era, built off Puebloan housing, copied the style, because the resources were widely available,
Yep.
as well as something that is a little bit interesting. The way different Puebloan societies, because you have, the Zuni, you have the Yakima, I'm trying to remember the other one, and I live like all around them.
Yeah.
um, you have the Karis, and the thing about it is, there's subtle differences in the way the housings were built. My tribe, the Hopi, our housings was primarily built, of course, of mud and stone brick.
Right.
And if you go look down towards, the Rio Grande, their houses, they're the same style, but their houses were constructed more of mud and grass.
Right.
It is really interesting to see the subtle differences between the housings and different styles that came with Puebloan society.
Oh yeah. But you can still draw parallels to European and Asian societies and how they eventually discover things. I mean, you look at the peat houses that were in Wales, England, and Wales. Uh, Not only were they made of whatever dirt they had available, but they were able to use the actual um, grass as it's all ingenious. I can't put it quite into words, but it's all ingenious, and these are folks that absolutely had to adapt to survive. Um, it's from where you're talking about. I know it gets hot. It gets really hot. And plus, there's
And
some regular dangers there too.
of course, you had the wild animals as well as you had other raiders and so on and so on.
Hmm.
And I gotta say, I will point to just pure human ingenuity. It is crazy how well us as a species overall, how
Hmm.
well we can adapt.
Hmm.
And I gotta say, good going us.
Yeah, yeah. There's good and bad to it. I mean, you can. I
Oh
see
yeah,
I see people today, and I'm as guilty of it as anybody, that they can start off living in a house with 10 rooms, and eventually, over time, maybe they can't get to some of them, or maybe they're full, and then suddenly they're living in 3 rooms, and they don't even realize that they're not using over half their house because they've adapted to it. Um,
exactly.
yeah, and that's an amazingly good and sometimes frustratingly bad thing to have. Um, when you see a portrayal of something like the Trail of Tears, does that affect you? I mean, it's not the same, society, but does that affect you as a native?
Of course, the way I see it, and of course, other natives different views than I do. Um, the way I see it, the great tragedies like the Trail of Tears, the Sand Creek Massacre, and several others that occurred,
Hmm.
it is something that impacted us all, no matter how you look at it.
Hmm.
And it's one thing that a lot of us natives we like to acknowledge within our own communities. Even in some tribes, we do still have not celebrations, but remembrance days for certain great massacres or certain tragedies, and it's a great shame. That's honestly all I can say.
It is. It's a terrible shame, and it's absolutely unnecessary for one, and two, it was just a slaughter, basically, and the amount of area that had to be moved. It's amazing to me that anybody made it that far, because they weren't getting any help from folks along the way to do this sort of thing. And I may be a little wrong on the geography, but I believe it was mostly from Georgia to Oklahoma. Um,
Yep,
that's
and the
yeah,
and a little bit of the surrounding states.
yeah,
Oklahoma was known for a very long time as Indian territory.
yeah.
Um,
Until it was
and
taken
when
away.
states were
Yeah, and just
It was actually going to become its own state at one point. It was known as the state of Sequoia.
mm,
Several tribes came together along with the five civilized tribes and wanted to start their own state.
mm,
They made it far as Congress, but no further.
yeah,
They were denied for a very bogus reason, but the true reason behind it is at the time it was not favorable to have a state of non-European.
yeah, absolutely. And it wouldn't be controllable, that sort of thing. And later on, could you imagine if that would have happened and they discovered the oil in there? That whoa. they,
All,
I don't know how
all
long.
sorts of madness.
Yeah, I don't know how long it would have lasted as its own state at that particular point. The when when you talk to folks and and people come up to you and say, "Oh, you're Native American," and they try to relate to you. Do you take that as a good thing, a bad thing, or an amusing thing?
Honestly, all three. It depends. If someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, hey, cool, you're such and such," it's interesting if they actually are sincere about it.
Mm,
If they do want to actually understand and know, I'd be more than willing to tell and teach if they'd be willing to listen.
mm.
And of course, you have the few very unkind folk who, what is the word I'm looking for? Who just want to the novelty of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
And those people, I got very little to say. I find it very humorous sometimes, and sometimes not so humorous.
Yeah.
I do gotta say though, I'm a very difficult person to offend. That's like the biggest thing.
Mm,
There's some of my people who are, very quick to anger and very easily offended.
mhm.
But I'm not terribly.
Are you offended by Native American symbols in sports teams?
Honestly, no.
Mm.
I'm with the belief of free publicity,
Well,
but
yeah,
no.
there's that. Yeah, but I was here when the University of Illinois had their halftime show, and I frankly I always looked at it as a halftime show. I didn't think of it as being tied to the school or anything like that. There were some people, and that were once they decided to remove the that from the school, that decided they were going to pull all their money out of the school and never give them a dime again because of the halftime show. And I was like, what?
Well,
I don't understand. And
in
and
all
yeah,
I agree with you. It's one of those things that I find very, I can say foolish and odd, but at the same time, I do understand why.
yeah,
There are some people who are more sensitive than others, and that's okay. That's
yeah.
okay.
Well, I mean,
It's just personally, I had no problem with it. Most of my family, we had no problem with it,
yeah.
and of course, we had the few who did, and it was all right.
Well, I mean, I can see in some cases, like the Cleveland baseball and Washington, especially Washington football, which had an entire problem with race for a long time, other than the nickname. Um, that I can certainly see that, but when we had so many people coming from out of state, had nothing to do with the university, and then once it changed, they all left, acting as if they did
Yep,
something wonderful for Native Americans when really they didn't do anything but make people mad over a halftime show.
and caused more problems than they solved.
Yeah,
And that's the thing I find very, very interesting. A lot of times when activists, it's not so much Native Americans anymore who are activists.
right.
And it's good to support other people. It's good. I will never say no. Don't support my people.
Yeah,
I'd
right,
never do that. But the thing is, once a cause is started, say like one person dislikes something and a bunch of other people dislike it, but those people had nothing to do with it in the beginning.
right.
I fear it loses its meaning.
Oh yeah,
I feel as if we, oh, that whole fuss, it could have been pushed for something completely different that mattered more, such as around the Dakota Reservation, there's an oil pipeline. I think it is completed now, but during protests, that should have been the thing that held more weight than a mascot or a logo, I suppose, or
oh
even a
yeah,
name.
oh yeah,
It seemed like smoke and mirrors
yeah.
almost.
It's an infuriating thing that some folks do is concentrating on the least important thing and making that a cause. I mean, yeah, okay, now you made people feel bad. You feel good that you pretended to do something and still got nothing done. And now what? It didn't
Exactly, and
didn't help people in South Dakota. It didn't help people in the southwestern part of the U.S. or Oklahoma. It didn't do anything.
it just it made another group of people really sad, and that's about it. It didn't
Yeah, yeah,
in there, I guess, in their hearts and minds, it did true good, but ultimately, it seems as if it did nothing for the people that
yeah, yeah,
actually needed help,
yeah. Now
and
again,
that's the greatest shame.
when I look at the Washington football team, there's a lot of reasons behind. If you take a look at the history of the Washington football team, you'll see a whole lot of things that needed to be changed. and
Mm. Oh
not
yeah.
yeah, there was a lot of bad stuff around that sort of thing. There's actually a story that the um, Dallas Cowboys, when they came into the league, weren't going to get the vote from the Washington team to, and if they didn't get that vote, they weren't going to be able to be in the league. And the owner at the time, who was horribly, was just a horrible person, in my opinion, um, wasn't going to ever going to vote for him. And the Dallas team bought the rights to the fight song of the Washington squad, so they weren't going to allow them to use it unless they got the vote. I'm like, now, there's some activism for you.
It's
Thinking out,
clever activism.
yeah, it's thinking outside the box, and of course now they're the team everybody loves to hate. Um, the for you and VTubing, what got you involved in content creating and VTubing in general?
Well, in all honesty, I watched a lot of YouTubers in the
Mm,
past, but I was never terribly ingrained in the community.
mhm,
I wanted to show up for the occasional stream, but really recently I decided, the hell with it. Might as well. I see a bunch of people, doing very interesting things, and some teaching people, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna give it a try myself, and it gives me an excuse to ramble at people about the things I enjoy and the things I, love to do and teach.
yeah,
And the main thing that got me in the content creation is the want to teach. That, and of course the ramble.
yeah. Well, if I imagine from where you're at, a lot of the stuff that you'd want to teach to people, they either already know, or you're kind of preaching to the choir in some cases. Um, on
Surprisingly, not.
Really, I would have thought it.
Not really.
Yeah, well, that's
Um,
upsetting.
Most people who I end up reteaching is a lot of the older folk.
Mm,
It is those people who already know the stories and the things I tell them, and they it's mainly them. And a lot of the younger people, some of them do, some of them don't. It's a very like heavy mixed bag. But overall, I'm just happy to reach a wider audience. And the one thing that makes me truly happy, when I first started doing this, pretty much last month,
uh-huh.
um, and it is like the most craziest thing. I spent the whole evening after making my first video. It's not the greatest. It was not polished at all. And even now, some of my videos still aren't very polished. Um, it was very, very scary
Mm,
and very, very crazy to see. I went from one view to 60 to 70 to 80
yeah,
to 1,000, and it's crazy watching that go up.
yeah. It is.
And
But it is.
and like the next few days, go ahead.
No, I see. At that point, it's not just the message, but it's also the messenger. And it's. It,
And the thing that hits me is a lot of times I'd get a few comments here and there, and they're all very supportive and very kind. And the few I'd get is, I'm the first Native American VTuber they've ever seen,
Mhm. That we
and
know of.
apparently I fulfill a very like certain niche for people,
Hmm.
and people like it, I guess.
Oh,
So
yeah. I
I'm contented with the people I have.
see. It's a great opportunity to show. The potential audience is 95% of the planet in this particular medium. Um, Anybody who has a phone can look at it, and it doesn't cost a mint to do if you already have computers and stuff. Um, and you can do it anytime at your pace. You can edit it the way you want it. You want to make sure that you have created your own, basically your own niche. Um, and that's got to be, when you see those results, like the more and more people coming to watch. Um, is that a source of pride? Does it spur you on to do even more things?
Honestly, it brings me a lot of pride. At the same time, it's very worrisome.
Mm,
I try to keep a somewhat decent schedule, and it's a thing that worries me. You see, if I post, I like to make my videos in big clusters, so I like to make 3 or 4 all
Mhm.
at once, then post them over the week,
Right.
so I don't have to worry all that much.
Yeah.
But I always get the feeling, I should post them all at once and see which one does the best. And that's the thing. A big part of me, I don't really care if I do really good or not. I don't care, if I get a lot of views or subscribers or likes. If there's one or two, single people that came to watch my stuff and actually learned something and like my content, that's all I honestly care for. And I'm not a big VTuber at all. I only have a 160 subscribers on YouTube, and I don't do streaming yet. But when I reach 200, I intend to start streaming. But
Cool.
that's the thing, though. It's scary. I will
Mhm.
honestly admit that.
So when you do start streaming, what type of content are you going to have? The same type of instructional content, or do you have some other ideas?
Honestly, the original idea for my channel, and my channel is called The New and the Old.
Right.
The original idea was for it to be like almost like a variety show. You'd have gaming
Hmm.
along with just miscellaneous stuff, as well as you'd have history, but it turned more into history than gaming. And there's some of my viewers who are interested in watching me play games and other stuff. So I think I will slowly transition to doing gaming content, but as well keep up my history and teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody has, something they like, but a little something added.
Where you're at in the country, there is some media that's geared toward the Native Americans, and every once in a while, the stronger stations leak up here, um, especially on the AM band. It's interesting to hear the um, native music, um, and the sometimes the language that goes on during these shows. Would that be something you'd be interested in doing later on? Maybe doing your own type of musical program that incorporated history into it?
Most likely. Now, that brings up like a very interesting thing. I would be honestly 100% willing to do it. I fear I'm slowly running out of artist reviews, so
Mm,
I have to transition sooner or later.
yeah. Well, you got a really good delivery and voice for this. It's very it is. Let's put this the right way. It's very clear, but it's also not confrontational. Um,
That's one of the biggest things I've noticed. A few of my comments say I'm somewhat of a calming person, which I do not understand how. But they say I'm very friendly,
yeah.
and I try to be.
Yeah, well, it's very obvious that you're not coming in talking about even the more sensitive subjects. You're not coming in like a Cuisinart. You're coming in with facts, and you're presenting them very calmly and matter of factly, but still with an impact that lasts. That's not
Of
an easy
course.
thing to do. Um,
One thing my grandfather said to me when I was very little, if you're going to speak English, speak it well.
mm,
And I do my best to, speak well.
mm,
I try to speak formally, keyword try, but I'm not always the greatest at that.
yeah, yeah.
But along with my content, I intend to do book readings for people as well.
Oh, now that would be cool.
I intend to read a book. It's called Hopi Coyote Tales and some other native related books as well.
Will they relate to history or traditions or what?
Oral traditions and teachings.
Mm,
At least this book I'm going to start reading here. Funny enough, I intend to do the first video of it here on Sunday.
mm.
So tomorrow,
So, folks,
I
we're
intend to
gonna
record it and hopefully get it
y- y-
all done.
yeah, we're gonna have the links in the description so folks can check out what Sky's
Oh, of
got going on. Um,
course.
Absolutely, because fully I think this is a wonderful thing you're doing here. Um I just there's the opportunity here to show so many different people about the native um, ways and the history that certainly somebody in Australia may not be able to get to very easily. And that type of
And, and,
yeah, that type of global reach is pretty amazing to have. I, Growing up in the '70s, that wasn't possible.
and And honestly, all I gotta say is, I do the best I can. It may not be the greatest, and I may not be a complete historian, but one day I will be there,
Yeah,
and one day I'll be able to fully speak more about it. But
yeah,
honestly, if I can say anything, I'm proud of who I am, and I'm proud, to teach people at
yeah.
least what little I know. And in the grand scheme, I know nothing, so
Well, yeah. Well,
leave it like that.
that's true about anything, but the fact that you know something and you're willing to pass it on, um, unfiltered and um, as it happened, it makes a huge difference. It also builds trust when people know that you're not coming in with an agenda or trying to bash them over the head with something. This is what happened. It's very the message gets over clearer, I think, that way, um, and people are more accepting of it. That makes it. When you talk to other folks, maybe in your family or other folks that are from native backgrounds, and do you tell them what you're doing, and what's their response?
My family a little bit, and other natives, yes and no. A lot of them discover my stuff, and
Hmm.
honestly, all I tell them is, I'm just a Native American VTuber that does history. That's honestly, I keep it short and sweet.
Yeah. Well, what do they think of it?
Honestly, it's all been really kind.
Mm-hmm.
They're interested to see, things being taught with a very interesting me,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really, honestly, really about it.
Are they surprised that it's you doing it?
Yes and no.
Ah,
My family know I desire to be a teacher in some form or another.
yeah,
So they're not terribly surprised, and some other tribal people, mixed bag.
yeah. Did you ever get in front of folks with a microphone before, or was doing this your first time really performing?
I've gotten in front of microphones before, but in very smaller capacities,
Mm,
mainly through gaming and such and such.
right.
I used to be a big person who did Red M and Daisy RP and all that. So
Whoa.
I was kind of already used to speaking with people.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I said, we'll do it on a wider scale, see what happens.
yeah. Well, so far it's really good stuff, and I thoroughly expect that once you get the streaming going, and it might take a little bit to get a little more used to that live audience as you're working with them, but you're doing good work. You're doing work that needs to be done, and obviously it's very close to you what you're doing, which is a great ingredients for an excellent uh, uh, broadcast or video, and the content will certainly get across. Congratulations on that. Um, that's that's not easy to do.
I I do my best. Like I say, it's hard. It's hard to really say much more.
Yeah,
I do my best because I want to make sure people, have an idea of, what Native Americans are and who we were.
absolutely,
And I want to honor my tribe and my people the
absolutely,
best I can.
absolutely.
And that's honestly all I can really do.
Well,
And one thing I do intend to do once I'm a little bit bigger, I do want to do charity streams and such so I can, support my people in a different manner.
absolutely,
And that's the biggest.
absolutely, absolutely. And when you get those going, if I'm still hanging around, let me know so we can promote it as best we can, because that needs to be done too. Thank you so much for doing this. We need to know about.
Thank you for having.
Yeah, we need to know these things, and it's if we need to know about the history, and I think you're doing a great job with it. You're doing it the right way, and it's going to be very effective, and still is right now. Thank you so much for coming on, and I hope
Thank
we
you.
can talk again soon.
I hope so as well. I humbly thank you.
Thank you for listening to Eric Loy Interviews. Join us again next time when we talk to another member of the always interesting VTuber community.